It's all about the process, step by step. Today, you can start successfully in your business by using a proven process that works. Welcome to the Start Successfully podcast, where veteran entrepreneur Gabe Arnold shares his proven step-by-step process, the process you need to start successfully in any business. And now, here's your host, Gabe Arnold.
All right, everybody, welcome. This is episode number 2 of the Start Successfully podcast. I am really excited to have you here with me. I know some of you are probably driving. That's where I listen to a lot of my podcasts, or maybe you're working out at the gym or just hanging out waiting for something. Typically, I'm either trying to multitask or kill time when I'm listening. So I appreciate that you're here with me today. As you know, we've talked about kind of in the last episode, I'm going to be sharing with all of you, how to get started successfully, the tips and tricks and the secrets of entrepreneurs, myself, and others that we'll have on the show here as well. And today I'm going to share with you all the details about the business that I'm starting, the first quote unquote income report, even though it's actually just my expense report. But I'm going to track income for you guys every month and just share with you where we're at. And then I'm going to just share with you the step-by-step, process that I've taken to get started. And also, not only am I going to share with you guys, how to start things successfully, but you'll get to hear a little bit about my backstory on most of these episodes as well. So right after this break, I'm going to share with you a little bit about a backhoe, a gas line, and forgetting to make the proper phone calls.
This episode is brought to you by Copywriter Today. With Copywriter Today, you get a team of dedicated writers working for you on your content marketing needs. Get your email marketing, blog posting, white paper, sales copy, lead magnets, and so much more, written by professional writers that really understand how to drive your business. Copywriter Today is a one-stop solution, a subscription-based service with a low monthly cost. To get started now with a special offer just for you, visit copywritertoday.com/Start Successfully. That's copywritertoday.com/Start Successfully.
So this week's quote is from one of my all-time favorite entrepreneurs, Richard Branson, and it says, "You don't learn to walk by following rules. You learn by doing and by falling over." And that really rings true with me, not only because I really like the story of Richard Branson, what I've read about him and what he does, but also it just kind of rings true for my own, entrepreneurial journey, how I've learned, how I've discovered things, and how I've found the right way. And like I mentioned, obviously I'm going to share with you guys the ways to start successfully, the pitfalls to avoid, and the tips and tricks and the right tracks or behaviors to follow to be successful. But just to give you a little bit of background about who I am and a little bit of, just to kind of give you a little bit of history, I'm also going to share with you some of the crazy things that I've done, like we did last week. So early on, one of my first businesses was a construction or a modeling business. And I had learned from my grandfather how to lay stone and do brickwork and do all sorts of things and do masonry. And so when I started my own company, I was right around 18 or 19 years old when I started my first construction company. So one day, I got hired to build these stone piers at the end of this very long driveway for a really wealthy customer. And so I rented a backhoe because I needed to dig the footers and dig down and then pour the concrete and then begin building the piers. So rented a backhoe. I was going to dig it, do all the work. It's something I was, familiar with. I'd seen it done. I'd done a little bit of it with my grandfather and with some other guys that I had worked with. And I started digging, got down in Ohio here where we live. We get really cold winters. Like today, it started out being 3 or 4 degrees and the wind chill was below zero. It's not always that cold, but we definitely get some periods that it's that cold. And right now it's 15 degrees out. But when you build something around here, you have to dig down deep enough so that the concrete footing that's going to hold up everything, the house or the pillar that you're building or the wall or whatever it might be, needs to be below the frost line. So 3.5 feet is probably overkill for most cases or most winters, but that's typically how far you have to dig down to get approved for your permits and get approved for what you're building. So I was digging down, and I had gotten about 2 feet down. I had measured, got off the backhoe. I was there by myself, if I remember right, and I kept thinking, I'm like, all right, cool, I've got this first one almost done, and I took the bucket of the backhoe and scooped down into the dirt to keep digging a little bit farther, and I heard this pop and as soon as I finished pulling up that, and immediately I smelled natural gas. So I jumped off, I turned off the backhoe, jumped off, and I actually ended up jumping down into the hole with a clamp and some duct tape, and I clamped off this big, I think it was actually a plastic gas line, if I remember right, but it was about 1.5 inches across, and it was just spraying natural gas everywhere. And in that moment, I remembered something that my grandfather had always told me, and the other excavators that I worked with, they said, you always have to call OOPS before you dig. And OOPS in Ohio is Ohio Utilities Protection Service. What they come out, they come out and they use this little wand that tracks where utility lines and gas lines are buried, and then they put flags in the ground so that you don't dig through gas lines. But in that moment, I was obviously a little bit scared because with a spark or with the wrong conditions, it could have blown up and been a huge fire and cost me who knows how much money. But besides that, it could have been really dangerous. But I remembered in that moment learning very clearly in another very scary situation. I feel like I've done so many foolish things as a younger young man, but I remembered I'm never gonna not call OOPS again because I don't want to deal with this situation and nearly die. And I think it ended up costing me, there was some sort of minor fine or repair. I think it cost me less than $1,000 to fix the line, but obviously that kind of dug into my profits for the job. And it was just a really clear example of when you do things the wrong way, you risk your profits, obviously, but in a lot of cases, even in the digital world or in a more quote unquote safe environment where we're doing design work or doing something in a more professional instance, we're risking the safety and or livelihood of our team or of our own family, because if we really screw things up, then it could cost us the job, it could cost us our credibility, it could cost us a lot of things. And so knowing the right path to do things is kind of part one, but then actually following in the right path that you've been given is the really critical part. And the other thing that I've learned is that I've done a lot of things in the wrong order. It's really hard to be successful when you're doing things in the wrong order. But when we're young, actually, like age-wise, when we're young, it's hard to get out of our own way ego-wise. And when we're young entrepreneurially, like in an entrepreneurial sense, it's difficult to get out of our own way because maybe you're starting something for the first time and you're in your 40s or 50s or even 60s and you just don't know what you don't know. Sometimes it's difficult to just trust the process or trust somebody that's already been there before. But when you do that, things go so much smoother. There's been many times where I've, read a book or taken a course or gone to a webinar or gone to a conference and heard somebody that's made millions of dollars and been doing it for years explain the step-by-step process to be successful. And still somehow I'm unable to translate that into my daily actions to follow the process. And so that's normal. That's normal that happens to us. But what I want to do is encourage you to find real mentors in your life, real mentors in your career who have actually done what you want to do. You see real proof of it. They're not just a fad for now, but they've been doing this for years and years, hopefully a decade or more, and you can follow in their footsteps. Because when you just follow their instructions and their path, everything becomes so much easier. And so my story about digging up a gas line was my example of how I've done things wrong. I've done so many things wrong. But what I want to share with you in the content of this podcast and in the weekly guests that we'll be having on and just in the things that I'll be sharing with you is how to do things right. So I'm going to share with you everything that I'm doing that's working, and I'm also going to share with you the mistakes I make along the way too, because you'll be able to avoid them if you really just are able to listen and apply those things to your life. And so in my mind, the success of an idea, when you have an idea, you're starting something out, you're starting a new product for your existing business, or you're starting a brand new business because you've never done that before. Success in my mind is measured when you get your first real dollar from a customer, not from an investor, not some friend or family that's just trying to help you out, but somebody that actually needs your service and actually pays you for it. And so I kind of base my whole mindset around launching something on how fast can I test the idea against a real consumer, against somebody that actually wants to pay me. And that's what I encourage people to do early on is when you come up with your idea, create basically in reality or in concept a one-page sales sheet. So you'll say, okay, my idea is to sell this product or service, and here's what it's going to include, and here's what I'm going to sell it for, and here's how it works. If you can condense your idea down to one page, then you can try to communicate it to a potential prospect, and if they get it, then great, because they can pay you for it, and they can get involved, and I'm going to dive into that a little bit more. But if you can't, then maybe you need to work on your idea more, but also you shouldn't go out and spend thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, as I've seen people do before, building out your product, your platform, or something before you know if your idea is real. And that validation of what a real idea to me always comes back to, did somebody actually give you money for it? So that's why I encourage people, sell off that one page, sales sheet. That's the most important key to your business is, will somebody give me money for this? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my business idea here, what we're launching, where I'm at in the process, just to give you like a step-by-step follow-along guide in a sense of how I'm doing it. And hopefully you can translate this to what you're working on or what you're thinking about doing. And of course, reach out with comments, let me know, where you need help or give me feedback on this process and if it's been helpful to you. So my idea that I came up with is to launch a resume writing service. And the reasoning behind that is there's a few fold. I'll give you kind of the basics of why I chose to do that. And for those of the folks that do end up wanting to join our mastermind, I actually go into great depth about this, about why I chose it, and there's a whole kind of course unit about it. But the basics are this. The idea kind of came into my mind earlier in 2016 when I did a small project for a resume writing service, and one of the things that they were just having a huge problem with, which is an awesome problem to have, is they said, hey, we're so busy, we don't know how we can keep up with all the calls and all the leads that are coming in. And so I was like, wow, that's interesting. That's, you don't hear that every day from a small business. They weren't a huge mega, corporation or anything. It was somebody that had started out and launched this business. So I was like, oh, that's noteworthy. That's kind of a weird thing that you don't usually hear that from a small business. And then I heard the same kind of feedback from another client where we were doing a project, and I was like, wow, that's really interesting. You guys are slammed and you just launched. And so it's like, okay, this is an industry or a service or a space that when you get a little bit of notoriety or a little bit of exposure, then you're getting busy. Because I knew the advertising technique of both of these clients, and it wasn't anything crazy. They weren't spending thousands of dollars to get exposure. It was from word of mouth and some basic advertising. And then there was a third one. So that same thing, like really busy for offering this service. So I was like, okay, this is a noteworthy idea or business idea where there's a lot going on. And then the other thing that made me choose to do this is that with my service Copywriter Today, I've really worked hard over the last few years to nail down a process that allows me to recruit writers consistently. So I knew that on the back end of the service here, I'm like, I know how to recruit writers. I've recruited probably almost, I would guess, over 200 at this point, because we're well over 100 writers that we've recruited over the last few years. And I know how to recruit writers. So that would be a plug and play part of my business in a sense for this resume writing service, because I know how that works. I know how that process goes, and then I can also take some of my less busy writers on that side and move them over into this product or business. And so to expand around those two decision points a little bit, because I think it's important and it's something you should think about in your business, is number one, there's usually an opportunity in an existing marketplace to create more value or provide a better service. You don't always have to come up with a brand new concept. Not that those things aren't amazing or are not things you shouldn't pursue. I mean, when Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook, phenomenal idea. When PayPal was created, phenomenal idea, brand new industry creating business, just like creating the personal computer was creating an industry. But I'm very realistic about my time ability and my resources. And so I don't always sit here and daydream, honestly, about creating an industry. I look at existing industries and say, okay, what opportunity is there to become better at it, create a more valuable service? So even though I look at resume writing and I've done some competitive research and I see that there's obviously other people out there offering it, I don't see something truly, incredibly valuable compared to what's out there. So there's an opportunity for me to create something more valuable. And I learned that lesson or that thought process from one of my favorite podcasts, the Forever Jobless podcast by Billy Murphy. And he says the most important first step of creating your business idea is determining if you can create more value than what exists in the marketplace today. And so that's been a huge measurement for me of what business idea to choose. That's the first thing. Like when you're looking at your business idea, determine, hey, can I really create something that's even more valuable than what's out there? Because you can't just be a Me Too service. You're never going to make it. You've got to stand out. The other thing that I look at when choosing a business idea is what existing unfair advantage do I have compared to everybody else? And my existing unfair advantage is that I know how to recruit writers. In a sense, I can do that in my sleep. It's not something I have to work hard at. Whereas if somebody who even would listen to this podcast and be like, I'm going to do the exact same thing, they may not have that asset in their toolbox where they can just say, oh yeah, I know how to recruit writers. So when you're looking at a business idea, say, what unfair advantage do I have that I can apply to make this business grow faster or be more successful? Maybe it's, your social network. Maybe it's some connection that you have where you're like, I know all these people in this industry space that would be willing to help me because I've worked with them and helped them in the past. Maybe it's your personal, ability to do something that you can kind of teach other people or replicate off of that. But always look for that unfair advantage, because when you do that, then you're able to, accelerate your growth. So that's just like a little bit of my thought process behind how I chose the idea or how I came up with it, because I wanted to launch this year as a part of the Mastermind group. It was a challenge, and also just for a challenge for myself, launching the business, which is called yourresumebuilder.com. My challenge to myself is 18 months from today, I'm going to be in a position where I can sell it for at least $250,000. And I've never sold a business before, so this is brand new for me, but I understand the process of building it up, and then I have actually a marketplace that I know where I can sell it. And at that point, I'll get a valuation for it, and I'll either sell it or maybe I'll hold on to it if the cash is more valuable to me. But it will be worth over $250,000, for sale, and it will be at the point that I could easily sell it. So that's the challenge to myself and to everybody in my mastermind, and anybody that comes along on this journey here, listening to the podcast. So what I'm going to be doing is, sharing with you exactly how I go through this process and how I'm going to create a service that's more valuable than the other services out there, and just kind of walk you through the entire process. So one of the things, like I said, the most important thing is when creating a new product or service is how can you be more valuable than everybody else out there? It's key, because otherwise you're a Me Too and you're competing head to head. And then in a minute, I'm also going to tell you about creating your own category for your business. But in my research of the other resume services, I found something really interesting. This was kind of an interesting value pitch. It says, we guarantee you that you will find a job within 45 days or we'll give you your money back. So that really stood out to me. That was a really interesting pitch. But I also didn't totally feel like that was credible or it could be backed up. That was my first reaction to it. I don't know what you think of that, or, you're listening here today with me, but or what other people think of it. But I think there's a lot of factors in getting a job. And if you don't show up for interviews, or you're horrible at interviews, or you have no valuable skills to offer the potential employer, then of course you're not going to get hired. So I thought it was just a very interesting guarantee to put on a resume writing service. But what they did do is they did catch my attention. So it was a good example of like a really catchy kind of tagline. So what I felt I could confidently offer as a beginning step on being more valuable than the other services is that we will offer lifetime resume updates to anybody that stays active in our membership area, because we're going to have interview tips and training and career resources and everything inside of a membership area for anybody that becomes a customer. And they're going to have a very small reoccurring fee or annual fee potentially to stay active in that community. So that leads me to the last point that I want to share with you about like product creation or development, and that is if you can create your own category for your business, you'll stand out in your consumer's mind. You'll create a new position in their mind. And there's a book called Positioning, and I believe it's by a guy named Jack, and I think it's Jack Trout. But I'll get together the notes and put that in the show notes for you guys. But he says, hey, if you can create a unique position in your prospect's mind, you don't have to compete with anybody. So, for example, like back in the computer days, there were people saying like, this is the first personal computer, or this is the first supercomputer, or they were creating these categories even inside a broader category so that they could stand out as the first in their area. And when you position yourself as the very first of this type of thing, then you're not competing with anybody else in the marketplace. And so far, I haven't seen anybody say, we're the resume service that offers, lifetime updates. So that's my positioning point, so that I can say, you're resumebuilder.com, the only resume writing service that gives you lifetime resume updates. And as you're thinking about your business idea, think about how you can position yourself as completely unique. Create your own category. Instead of trying to just fit in and compete against other folks in the same space, create your own category for your business, and you'll really have a competitive advantage from a marketing standpoint. So that's just like some thought process, or kind of how I've gone through developing the business idea and where we're at now. It's brand new, so we're launching yourresumebuilder.com this week, so you may see some rough versions or things not working. That's okay. For me, I always believe that you need to just have a basic rough version out there so you can see if there's any traction for your idea. So as somebody that has a technical team, has done a lot of technical stuff myself, it's easy for me to put up a website and prove my concept that way. For somebody that's non-technical, you don't need that website. Just write yourself that one-page sales sheet that says, here's my product, concept name, here's what we offer, here's how it's going to work, and go out there and get feedback on it. And I'm going to dive into that a little bit more, but don't get stuck in thinking, oh, I need a fully functional app for this, or I need to hire 4 people before I can go out and sell. Or don't allow yourself to come up with these excuses or honestly bad reasons to not prove your concept with real consumer dollars. So what I'll share with you here is kind of my basic expense, / income report, because I'm going to be doing income reports basically every month is the goal here. And this is the first month. I literally just started. I'm going to break down the costs that I have involved in this, and I'm going to share with you guys what we're making, the pricing, and everything like that. So far to date, I've got hosting, which is on my existing server with some other projects, but if I were to go out and buy that on its own, it would be $15 a month or less. I hired a manager to help me with the project named Jeffrey, and I'll probably have him on here soon as well. He was one of my folks that was one of the writers on the Copywriter Today side, but I've just hired him for just a few hours a week to help me push some things forward, so it's not just me doing it my own, and so that cost is about $150 a week right now. If you're looking for somebody to help you do some of the admin work or do some of the, just kind of carry a little bit of the load for you, a great site to check out for that is called virtualassistantassistant.com. So it is, that word assistant is twice. It's virtualassistantassistant.com. And there you can find all sorts of different VAs that will help you with any, all sorts of different tasks. If you need outbound calls, if you need admin work, if you need really high-end executive support, there's just a huge number of resources there. And a little side note about my manager that I hired to bring in Jeffrey. I'm doing something new. We're testing it, and him and I are testing this for 6 months, and then we're going to evaluate it and see if we want to continue to do it. But I'm actually going to do a small profit sharing percentage with him on the overall revenue, because I want to pay him for his work and make sure that he's motivated and has the resources that he needs for his ongoing work week to week, but I want him to be incentivized to help grow the company, because he'll probably help me with some of the early sales. We'll probably bring in some other salespeople as well. But as my lead, product manager of Your Resume Builder, he's going to be the one who is responsible alongside of me for growing the company. So I'm giving him a small percentage of our overall revenue so that he's incentivized by that as well. So like I said, we've got $15 for hosting a month. We've got $150 a week, which comes out to about $600 a month in manager cost with Jeffrey. And then I bought an 800 number, which cost me $20 a month through the service that I already have phone service through, which is callruby.com. They're an awesome service that will answer your phone calls live, have a really nice professional receptionist kind of, feel for when people, call your company. I really like them. Early on, I've used a service, just to kind of give you guys some resources, I've used a service called Callfire, and you can get toll-frees from them for $3 a month. It takes a little bit of technical ability to set up forwarding them to your phone, and then 500 credits or minutes is $25. So that's a really cheap way to do it. If you want to get an 800, but you don't want to be into a monthly reoccurring that's expensive. So that's just kind of another side note there. The other thing that I bought was an Uber conference line, because when customers of your resume, pay for the resume writing, they're going to then be sent it to a booking screen where they'll book a time to work with one of the writers and do a short interview process to begin writing their resume. So that was $18 a month. And then my back end for project management, you could easily do this with like Basecamp, but I'm actually building out my own back end with knack.com. That's KNACK.com. And you can get an account there for $39 a month. I've built a lot of like process flow and back end stuff there, because with very little technical knowledge at all, if you can kind of work in Excel, or if you've ever used Access in the past or done anything kind of somewhat technical there, you can use Knack to build your own kind of applications. And then I've got about 24 hours of research and kind of like time in the website. And then I use an online accounting software called Xero, which is Xero, for my finance tracking. And that's $9 a month. So those are just to give you guys kind of an overall rundown. So with my monthly reoccurring fees for this project so far, I'm at $101. And then for my manager cost, which is optional, honestly, for starting up a new business, I could do this on my own if this was the only thing I was focused on. But at this kind of stage of my entrepreneurial career, I would rather have somebody in and collaborate with me, and I've got a little bit of money to invest. So again, my manager will cost me around $600 a month at this stage until we grow, and hopefully we'll be growing quickly here. So if you're looking at starting a business or something, you could easily start up for less than $150 a month. Or if you wanted to bring in somebody else for a few hours a week, or a virtual assistant or something like that, you could be starting for like $700 a month. And that's that's kind of my expenses where they sit now. So I haven't made a single dollar yet, and I'm only a week or so in here with the project, so I'm only a couple $100 in, but that's kind of where the expenses sit. And I wanted to share with you guys the breakdown and the basics there, because I don't want you to think that starting a business or starting up something successfully has to be super expensive. You don't need thousands of dollars. I started my other businesses for even less than what I'm sharing with you here, for like $50 in some cases. But it doesn't have to be expensive if you know where to go and what to use, and if you reach out to your network of people around you that are willing to help you. So like I said, I've got about $700 or so invested for this month, for January 2017 here. And so my downside is I spent $700 and absolutely nothing works, and I would probably try for a second month, and I would be in $1,400 or $1,500, and nothing would have worked. That would be my worst case downside, because next week 2 of this project, basically, because we officially started a couple days before the first of the year here, week 2 of my project, we will be out selling. We will be saying, hey, what do you think of this service? We'll be going to people that we know need resumes. So my worst case downside is about $1,500, and my best case, my upside, is that one sale, my product entry pricing for my product is $157 for the basic resume. One sale covers my monthly service costs, and 5 sales, I make a few dollars this month. So we're not talking about like massive amounts of sales. I don't have to have some landslide sales activity. I really just need to do like a little more than one sale a week in order to be break even and like proof out the concept. So it's a really low startup cost. And that's how I think you should treat a business idea. I think you should put very little into it in the beginning until you see if people are willing to pay you. After the short break, I'm going to just go into more detail about the basic framework of how I think about every business idea and how I think every entrepreneur should get started, and then the pitfalls to avoid when you're starting up with your new idea. Are you looking to get started successfully? Today I want to invite you to join the Start Successfully Mastermind group. You can check it out by going to startsuccessfully.com/mastermind. There, I'll share all the details with you, and you can give it a try for just $1 for the first week. Inside the group, I'll share with you all the templates, all the details and strategies and everything that I'm doing to build out the new businesses that I'm working on, and you'll also get insider strategies and tips from our guests. So go ahead and check it out, startsuccessfully.com/mastermind, and we'll see you on the inside. All right, so we're back here, and like I said, I want to share with you just a framework that I use to start up any business idea or see if it has merit. The number one rule for you is don't overcomplicate it. If you're listening or you're making notes or you're where you can write this down, or you want to make a note here as you're listening, just write that down. Don't overcomplicate your idea. Just don't overcomplicate it, because normally what I do is see people overcomplicate their idea before they even fully test it, and then it just leads to all sorts of problems down the road, and they may never even get their idea off the ground because of that bad choice. So what I mean by start with a one-pager for your idea is, let's just keep it super simple. Let's just say, like, you heard about my idea and how I'm doing it, but let's just say, hey, you're going to start a landscaping company in your neighborhood. All you would have to do is say, this is John's landscaping service. We're going to mow your lawn for $35, once a week, and we'll include blowing your driveway and weed whacking. And you walk around your neighborhood and you say, hey, I'm starting a new landscaping company. You knock on somebody's front door and you say, it's going to be $35 a week to mow, and here's what it includes. Would you be interested in doing that? And people will say, oh yeah, that's a great price, or nope, I'm not interested. They'll tell you right there. And if somebody says, yes, I'm interested, then you say, okay, here's how it works. If you're willing to pay me for 2 months right now, then you're going to get this low price because it's $35, and normally it's going to be, $75 or whatever it is. And if you're unhappy for any reason, I'm going to give you all your money back. And you can give them a little guarantee, and that can be all literally on that one page. And if they give you money, then here's what happened. You just validated your idea. Your pricing works at that level. They're willing to try it with you. You presented the idea well. If they don't give you money, then something's wrong with your one-page idea. It's not valuable enough. Your pricing isn't right. You don't know how to sell or present it. You have all these things that you can go back and work on, but you immediately, in literally a matter of moments, got in front of your customer and figured out if the idea was good. And say you're not doing a service business where you're going to walk up to people's front door. What if you're like, I'm going to create this new software that solves this problem? That's great. Figure out who it solves the problem for. Get on the phone and say, hey, Ryan, I'm creating this new service. I think it's going to solve people's problems by saving them time when they're working in this type of situation. Would you be willing to give me some feedback on it? And you start a conversation and get the feedback and say, let me send you this one pager. Here's what our service does. And what do you think about it? And they'll either respond and say, this really wouldn't be a fit for me. Or they'll be like, yeah, this sounds like a great idea. I'd love to try it because that would solve X, Y, and Z. And then you go, okay, great. So here's what I'm doing in order to launch this. Just be honest with them. Just tell them exactly what you're doing. I am going to, give you the first 2 months for, $300 or $200 or whatever. You come up with a discounted pricing because they're prepaying. And then you say, if you like it, great, you can stay on month to month for this amount. And if you don't like it, or if we don't deliver on what I told you I was just going to deliver on in this one-page sales sheet, I'll give you all your money back. And you can put that in writing to them, and then you take their payment. And then what happens is if you go out and you talk to the first guy and he's like, yeah, I love it, and he writes you a check or gives you a credit card and pays you, but you go to 5 more people and nobody wants to go for it, you just go back to the first guy and you said, you know what, like I told you that I was going to give you your money back if this didn't work. You were unfortunately the only person that thought it was valuable, so here's your money back. But if you go to those 5 or 10 other people and they all give you a prepayment for your idea, you've completely validated the idea. You really, in my opinion, only need like 5 people to pay you, 5 or 10, really not that many. So imagine that it does go well. We'll go back to the landscaper and say you walk around your neighborhood or in your area or town and you get 10 people to pay you, 2 months of mowing right there, we'll say on your cul-de-sac. So then you've got $700 of money to start the business, and start your operational with customer money. And I'm sure that may sound like a little bit of an simplification to you. And in some senses, I'll agree with you. It's a little bit, there's more you have to do. But what I like about this process, what I like about doing it, is that it forces you immediately to be in front of the customer with your concept and to validate with real dollars. And you can build a one-page sales sheet. You can, in my case, I've got a few hours in building a website. Doesn't take me that long. I have resources to throw it together. But the point is, don't spend more than a few days, at most, a week maximum, putting together the sales tool or the resource. Do not go build a full app before it sells to somebody. Do not go spend a bunch of money on inventory before somebody has bought anything. Do not go invest weeks and hours and days and all sorts of time in something before you validate it. If you do that, you're doing everything backwards. Your goal of becoming an entrepreneur is create something more valuable than what exists out there, and then go sell the concept to a few early adopters, and then get to work and deliver on it. That's the process that everybody should follow if they want to start a successful business. Where I see people, messing it up is that they either are afraid or are unwilling to go out and pre-sell an idea, or when they have that opportunity and they've basically pre-sold it, they don't take the money. I have a friend named Tony who he's starting up a new service. It's kind of like a consulting service with like a mastermind group tied to it. And so he sat down with a potential prospect. He talked about the idea. He was right there. He basically had his one pager in a sense, or he presented it. Of here's what's going to offer, and he said, what would you be willing to pay for something like that? And his prospect said, man, I'd pay you $500 for that right now to sign up for the first few months. And this is common, but this is the kind of thing that happens. Is Tony didn't take the money, and that's because sometimes we lack confidence, or we're not sure about the process, or there's a lot of things that we allow to be excuses, for ourselves, and we prevent our own success. If you stick to the very simple process that I laid out for you of saying, here's the discounted price, here's what will be included, you're prepaying for this amount of time or this much of the service, and if you're not happy for any reason, I'll give you your money back. You're putting yourself and your customer in a very safe place, because if you do the work and you know that you have this money back guarantee, over your head, then you're going to really work hard at it and you're going to deliver. You have this high level of accountability, and there's no risk for them. You can put that in writing to them, and don't spend that money until you've delivered. That's like your bankroll that you use after you've delivered, or after you know the idea works. But unfortunately, and everybody does this, and I've done this, so I'm not pointing it out as a bad thing, but unfortunately, Tony missed this opportunity of having cash in hand and having a validated idea. He can go back and ask for it, and he can do the same thing again, which I'm sure he will. But he could have taken the money right then and been operational and validated the idea. So some people, when they get to the threshold there and somebody says, yeah, I'll give you money for that, they back down because they're afraid of their ability to deliver. And some people never get to that conversation because they don't use the one-pager concept. They don't put something basic together and sell off of that. And they come up with excuses like, well, I don't have an accountant yet, or I really am going to need a full-time salesperson for this, or I don't know about this technical aspect, or, I need to take a class about this first, or, well, in reality, some of those things may be true or partially true. They are not stoppers. They're not game stoppers in you getting out there and validating your idea with money. So I get very passionate about that because it's really hard for me when I see people who really want to, and I think deserve to have their own business, get stuck because they make up excuses, or they're sitting there on the doorstep and not taking people's money when people are like, oh man, that is so valuable, that will solve my problem, here, I'll give you money now, and they don't take the opportunity. So learn from these mistakes, learn from what I'm sharing with you, and don't allow yourself to make up excuses that don't have anything to do with validating the idea. But I'll leave it at that because that makes me kind of crazy, because I feel so bad for people that want to get to a successful point and they're getting tripped up by that. And then the last thing that I'll share with you today is that anytime you try to do something new or grow or improve your situation or solve a problem, you're going to encounter this huge monster that I'm not the first person to name it this either, but you're going to encounter this huge monster named resistance, and it literally will feel like a monster standing in your way. So, like, for example, I'm like, this year I'm going to do a weekly podcast, and this is week 2. I was supposed to record this 2 days ago, and here's what happened. I got really sick, got a really bad cold, and then on top of that, my microphone started having this really bad humming noise that honestly I didn't notice until after the fact. Unfortunately, was in the first episode. But I'm like, I can't have people listening to this and having this kind of like little bit of ringing in the background. That would really annoy me. So I had these 2 little, things of resistance that if I would have let myself, I would have been like, oh man, well I can't do it now, or I'm going to allow this to not, keep me from hitting my goal. But I'm like, you know what, I'm going to release by the first week of January, which I did with the first one, and then in the second week of January, we're going to have the next one, and we're going to keep going. Every week, I'm going to put this out there. Even if only 1 or 2 people every week or month get benefit from this, that's okay, because I'm here to try to serve and help and do everything I can to help others start successfully. But immediately that barrier, that monster of resistance rose up. And in my friend Tony's story, who I just shared a little bit about how he's developing the idea, he's right there, he's doing really well, but he kind of hit that that barrier where he didn't take the money at the right time and so that he could fuel the idea. At the same time that's going on, where he's learning the process there, he had somebody in his family get really, really sick. And that's like a legitimate issue. It's not like something made up or an excuse. But that literally happened at the exact point that I felt like he was about to step forward and be really successful with his idea. And the reason that I bring that up for you is that when you're on to something, when you have a good idea, when you're on the edge of being successful, you're going to have sickness. It just happens. I mean, I can't tell you how many times things like this have happened to me. You're going to have family issues, like unfortunately somebody maybe gets sick, or there's going to be a death in the family, or you're going to have your friends and family, like in a sense, rise up against you and say, oh, you can't do that, or that's a bad idea, or are you really qualified for that? And so the monster of resistance just pops up everywhere, and there's no rhyme or reason for that, like sickness or like things breaking, or that's normal. That just happens. When people are resisting you, there's some psychology behind that you need to understand, because it's just kind of how life goes, and I've encountered it over and over in my entrepreneurial journey, and I want you to recognize it and just identify it for what it is. Those friends and family, those people, those coworkers, those people that you run into or that that are kind of standing in your way or saying, "Oh, you can't do that. You're not qualified." They're not bad people. I mean, I just want to put that out there. They're not. I really don't feel like anybody is truly out there trying to hurt you or make it more difficult, but they are uncomfortable that you may be progressing and growing, and they're not. And so they're more comfortable in trying, in a sense, to drag you down or pull you back or ask you to stay average, because imagine what would happen is you and your friend Sarah today are equals in their mind. You both have jobs, or you're both at the same level, or you grew up together, or you've been friends for a while. You guys all make about the same money, have about the same success, live in the same neighborhood. Their unconscious fear, their subconscious fear is that if you become really successful, what would happen if you made hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars like you wanted to, and really transformed your life for you and your family? They would feel left behind, and they would feel bad. And so in self-preservation mode, this is just human psychology in my experience and the little bit that I've researched about it, they're going to try to hold you down to make sure that the status quo stays the same. And that kind of psychology is just self-protecting. They're not trying to hurt you. I really don't believe that. In some cases, obviously, have your eyes wide open. There are people out there that are going to try to hurt you or stop you in a negative way. But in many cases, people are just trying to protect themselves, and it's too hard for them to see somebody succeed or exceed beyond the levels that they believe are possible. So that's the psychology that is occurring when your friends and family go like, oh, I don't think you're really qualified for that, or can you really do that? They're just protecting their own internal system, their own thought process. And you have to break out of that and go beyond that if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. So I'll leave it at that. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for listening. And I believe our first guest will be on next week. And each week when I do bring on guests, they'll be talking about how they started successfully, their idea, how they got to the validation point of validating with dollars. And so I'm excited about that. We've got a few different folks lined up, and I just have to confirm which is going to be first here. If you enjoyed this, I would love it if you'd leave me a great 5-star rating where you found it, either on Google Play or on iTunes. And definitely leave your comments. You can always reach out to me, and my email is gabe@startsuccessfully.com. You can reach me there, give me feedback, show ideas, questions, things you want me to answer. This is created for you. I want it to be something that you can use as a resource to be successful. So get out there, have a successful week, take action, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Start Successfully podcast. To connect with Gabe Arnold or with our guests and resources from today's show, please visit startsuccessfully.com.